It was one of the many things that he was good at. He could make a speech to a crowd of hundreds or write something beautiful like no other person I've ever known. Not surprisingly, to those of us who knew him, he knew he was good at that, like many things. He had a description for that ability. If a person who creates things using iron is called a blacksmith, he'd tell me and Wesley that his ability with words was that of a wordsmith. He always recognized that I also had this ability. But I felt almost certain that when this day came, any ability I've ever had at making words sound beautiful would leave me completely. But as I sat down to write this, it was Dad who became my muse and who gave me the inspiration to say everything that I'm about to say. Dad always recognized that, sorry, I just read that. As many of you know, Dad came from a bad home. Barack Obama once said that there are two types of men in the world. Those that spend their life trying to be nothing like their father, and those that spend their life trying to please him and live up to their dad. My dad was the former. He made certain that he was nothing like the man who raised him. The most amazing thing to me about him is that Wes and I are the latter. We spend our lives trying to please him and to live up to him. And Dad was indeed pleased with us, and he made certain that we knew it. True to Dad's ability of being a wordsmith, he wrote me one of the most beautiful poems when I was 14 years old. One of my biggest regrets in life has always been that I had lost that poem. Only until recently I realized I had not lost it at all, for I remember almost every word of it now. Like many teenagers, I had lost my way at the time. And Dad wrote this and hand-delivered me his beautiful words to my room some 25 years ago. And they will live on in my character as I try to pass them on to my children. His poem started by asking the question, "What shall I give my son?" And the answers that followed were his greatest desires. He wrote that he had hoped to teach us a love for discovering the truth and a desire for true love, a great passion for justice, he said, but perhaps most importantly to him, quote unquote, the memory of a good home. And he damn sure did that. All of that brings me to my last point. In the weeks before he died, he sent me a text message one night. Earlier that evening, him and I had cried together over the phone. As I began to read this text he sent me later that evening, I looked over at my wife and said, "I think my dad sent me a text by accident and he meant to send this to Mother." I quickly realized that it was not a mistake. And then how amazingly glorious and beautiful it was. I think the reason I cherish this writing of his more than anything else he ever wrote is because it reminds me of home. That memory of a happy home that he so desired to leave. It reminds me of what kind of person he was. It's beyond beautiful to me that the last thing that I'm going to share with you all is quite literally the last thing that my father wanted me to read at his funeral. My father's last written words to me were this: "Well, Yvonne, it's come to our last goodbye. It's come to that time when my body was so old that it fell apart. I don't know how long it will be before you follow, but hopefully no time soon. But know that whenever that day does come, if you stretch out your hand, I think you can reach mine." That's all.
Amen.
Thanks, man.
You're beautiful. Good job. Good job. Yes, sir. Good job.